This is the Transforming Anxiety podcast with Kelly Hanlon McCormick, and today is episode number 204. Let's talk about guilt. Welcome to Transforming Anxiety. I'm your host, Kelly McCormick. I'm a mom to 2 boys, a wife, friend, daughter, and sister, and I'm a certified life coach, yoga teacher, and soon-to-be mindfulness meditation teacher. I'm no stranger to anxiety, and I'm here to teach you how to manage your mind and your emotions so that you too can transform anxiety into calm, peace, and whatever you want for your life. I'm so glad you're here. Hey there. Welcome in today. I hope you're doing well. And folks, it has been so fun to hear from you, to hear all of your wonderful comments and insights from last week's conversation with Becky. I am so glad that so many of you enjoyed that episode and just resonated with what she was saying, what she shared with us, and what she wrote in her book. So if you didn't catch that one, it's last week's episode number 203, You Are Not Stuck with Becky Vollmer, and it's about her book, which just came out January 3rd, 2023, and the book is the same title, You Are Not Stuck. I have a few more interviews already lined up for this year, things that I hope will be equally helpful and equally supportive for you. They are totally different personalities, completely different books and approaches to anxiety. But hey, this is all part of the fun, right? So I'm really excited to bring some more people on the show, to have some more conversations about anxiety. So stay tuned. I have another one that will be coming up later this month for you. So today, let's talk about guilt. Fun. But this is a really important topic, I think. I see this one come up a lot with my students, and I have felt this one big time. So I want to talk about healthy guilt first, and then we're going to explore some aspects of unhealthy guilt and how this plays into anxiety and where this creates a really ripe breeding ground for more anxiety. All right? So let's talk about the healthy guilt first. Now, this is pretty cut and dry, although it's something we definitely all need to stay aware of. It's something we definitely all need to keep practicing with. It's simple, but for sure not always easy. One of those, yeah? And of course, here we have to go to the queen of guilt and shame, Brené Brown, and I'm going to use her newest book called Atlas of the Heart here. And she says, first we're going to look at shame. She says this by way of defining each of these things. Shame is, I am bad. The focus is on the self, not behavior. The result is feeling flawed and unworthy of love, unworthy of belonging and connection. Shame is not a driver of positive change. Guilt is, I did something bad. The focus is on behavior. Guilt is the discomfort we feel when we evaluate what we've done or failed to do against our values. It can drive positive change and behavior. So guilt, healthy guilt, is psychologically uncomfortable as an emotion, but it's helpful. Okay? The discomfort of the cognitive dissonance between what we've done or failed to do and our values drives meaningful change. Shame, however, corrodes the very part of us that believes we can change and do better. So healthy guilt is not shame. We have to first of all distinguish between I am bad and I did something bad. And I just want to highlight this. You may find yourself ping-ponging between the two of these when you have done something that you don't feel great about. It sometimes takes really conscious effort to keep yourself on the right side and stay in guilt and to stay out of shame. So if you find your thoughts veering towards the I am bad, steer yourself out of that and point yourself back towards I did something bad, right? That's a different family of thinking. It's healthier. It's a safer place to land. That can lead to positive change. Okay, all of this is healthy guilt, not the shame part, the guilt part. This is the healthy guilt, right? This keeps you living your life close to your values, to what you hold dear and important, and it helps you to learn and to do better when you inevitably make mistakes, right? This is clean, it's clear, it's healthy. Not always easy, but it's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward. Healthy guilt. Now, then there's the unhealthy guilt. And this is the kind of guilt that most of us spin in, that feels so horribly oppressive and heavy, and that creates boatloads of anxiety for us. Healthy guilt isn't comfortable, but it's understandable, right? It makes sense. We can process it when we're in a skilled and conscious place. Unhealthy guilt, though, this stuff is insidious. I sometimes hear students say things like, I feel guilty all the time, right? Or they talk about mom guilt. Or they describe the experience of never quite feeling like they're where they need to be. Like if they're at work, they're thinking about their kids and their family and their home. But when they're at home, they're worried about work. So there's a very fragmenting sense, a guilty complex that starts showing up. One of the ways unhealthy guilt can go is that we're living with a sense that we're not living up to internal or external expectations. Like all my perfectionists, if you're feeling guilty, I have a hunch it could be because you are living with never-ending cognitive dissonance of having insanely high expectations of yourself, right? Perfection. And you're living in the reality of your own humanity, also known as imperfection. And because those two never meet up, you're left with an overwhelming sense of guilt. Right? Anyone? Yeah? These internal expectations of success, of goodness, of being enough, of what you should look like, what you should have achieved by now, figured out by now, gotten by now. All of that internal pressure. There's a difference between that and the reality that you're living, right? Like a chasm, maybe. And that difference makes you think something has gone wrong here. Then you start feeling guilty because you're believing there's something you need to own up to or apologize for, or that you need to try harder and do better. And none of that is real. Well, none of it's real except as the emotional experience of suffocating guilt, right? So then there's the external expectations. This is just as bad. Our internal expectations are kind of unique and personal to each of us, but the external expectations are pretty universal depending on the certain roles or ideas and standards that we're all being held to, just given our life circumstances, given our situations, gender, geography, etc. The external pressures to look and act and talk and achieve and produce and go and do certain things in certain ways so that we can fit in and be normal and be acceptable and not make anyone uncomfortable. Oh my goodness, it's a lot. And again, if you're a human, meaning you're not living up to those external expectations to a perfectly perfect T 100% of the time, then, oh yeah, more guilt. That suspicion that you're not quite living up. You're not quite doing it. You're not quite enough. And we are plagued with this guilt, this unhealthy guilt, wondering how we can do more, how we can change, how we can get better so that we can finally conquer it and meet these external expectations. Except we can't. This is always a losing battle. And we're either left with the sense of guilt over having fallen short and not being enough, or we wake up and we say, oh, those expectations aren't mine anyway. We have the opportunity to right size the expectations, to put those back where they belong. And then we can see the guilt that we were feeling, that was a facade. That wasn't ours either. When you value something and you make a mistake, you can own that, apologize for that, learn from that. Healthy guilt. When you don't naturally, internally value something, when there's an ideal out there that has nothing to do with you. And think about this. Most rituals and traditions and expectations and shoulds and supposed tos, they're all based on the preferences and values of dead people, right? Our ancestors who are long gone that put these kinds of things in motion, right? When you don't value something and it's not yours, but someone planted the idea that the culture values it and you better step in line, then you wind up feeling guilty, not because you did or didn't do something that you hold as important, but because your way of being doesn't align with what society tells you you should be doing. And that still manifests as guilt, but it's really dirty guilt. It's murky, it's tricky, and it's not healthy. If this is left unchecked, this turns into chronic guilt, where you start understanding that you're too hard on yourself, that you're measuring yourself against society's measuring stick, not your measuring stick, but you can't shake the sense that you aren't good enough and that you should do more and be better and keep going anyway. All right, I want to talk for a minute about a book called Radical Awakening. This is by Dr. Shefali. She's talking in this section about pushing the status quo, about daring to go beyond, quote unquote, how things are, to enter a new vision of ourselves. And she says it like this: the first step begins in calling the fog a fog, distinguishing it from reality. In my own life, it took decades to actually name what I was going through. I so lived in fear of the disapproval of others that in order to keep the harmony, I took on the blame for what I was enduring. If anyone behaved badly, it was because of something I did. I thought this was how I was supposed to take responsibility. Little did I know that all I was doing was deflecting the other from taking responsibility. By my taking the blame, the other could stay comfortable and, therefore, happy with me. And here, the things she's taking the blame for range from being catcalled as she's walking by a construction site, to putting up with demeaning comments from a romantic partner, to doing more than your fair share of a project at work. All kinds of examples of how women burden themselves with blame in order to keep the people around them comfortable. This turns into a chronic sense of guilt. We feel guilty when we keep piling on all of that blame. And the real kicker is, it was never ours to begin with. Our blame taking means the people around us don't have to, or don't get to, take responsibility for their actions, for their words, for their mistakes or harm or careless behaviors. We burden ourselves to make them comfortable. If you've ever felt guilty for something and you don't get it, right? If it makes no sense why you'd feel guilty in that situation, you know you didn't do anything wrong that you need to own or apologize for or change. Maybe it's this. Maybe it's taking on the blame burden when whatever happened is really someone else's responsibility to own. I know I experienced this personally a lot for decades, and I've heard students and friends talk about this too, this guilty conscience, walking around with a sense of wrongdoing and self-reproach. Like we need to apologize for being here, for wanting things to go smoothly, for wanting others to be happy and content and comfortable in their own skin, for wanting that for ourselves. We do that to the point of self-sacrifice. And sometimes the emotional fallout looks like a chronically guilty conscience when we've done absolutely nothing to warrant it. Anyone? Does that resonate? Does that make sense? All right, I want to tie this back to anxiety, of course. We've talked about healthy guilt. Hey, I did something wrong. I need to own that. I want to apologize. I will learn and I will do better moving forward. That kind of guilt is clean. It's healthy. It's gonna happen. It doesn't need to create any anxiety because you don't have to hide from it. You don't have to avoid it. You can be with it. It makes sense. You own it and you move on. Right? That's the other part of the healthy guilt. It doesn't sit in your gut for days and weeks and years at a time. You flow with it. You process it in real time. You may need support for that, right? Talking it out with someone, writing things down so you can find the words that you want to use, taking a break, titrating out so that you can come back in and have a really hard conversation, fully renewed, sure. But that's healthy guilt. It doesn't really relate to anxiety much because you don't stew in it. You don't spin in it. It's pretty clean and clear, right? All the rest of it, though, the unhealthy guilt, that's where the anxiety sets in. There's no way to reconcile the unhealthy guilt by owning it, by apologizing for it, and there's nothing to learn from it unless you want to zoom way out from it and put it in perspective. Meaning, you'd recognize that it's not yours. Right? Unhealthy guilt is a stew of rumination where you're trying to connect dots that don't connect. It's an exercise in cognitive dissonance. And mostly, it's a way to abandon yourself over and over again, which feels terrible. And it creates mountains of anxiety. So this week, as you're moving through your life, I want you to check in anytime you have a glimmer of guilt and ask yourself, what am I feeling guilty about? Have I done something? Said something? Is there something I can point to and say that? I need to own that. I need to apologize for that, and I can learn from it and do better moving forward. Or are you spinning in unhealthy guilt? Is there absolutely nothing you can point directly to? No way of being or talking or acting that you know is misaligned with your own personal values and beliefs? Nothing you can or want to own. Nothing you can tangibly learn from other than a vague notion to do better, be better, get better. If so, this guilt is not yours. In fact, even though it may feel like guilt, I'd like to suggest that it's the internal experience in your emotional landscape of what all those shoulds and supposed tos and societal pressures, what all of that amounts to when you keep swallowing them down, unaware that they're not yours and that you could opt out. It's like fish don't know about water. And we don't naturally get hip to the belief systems and cultural conditioning that we essentially swim in all day, every day of our lives. So let this feeling, this inner tug and anxiety-inducing red flag signal to you that the water you're swimming in isn't working for you. Yeah? All right, guilt, healthy guilt, unhealthy guilt, and all of those expectations and shoulds. Oh my goodness. Look for the real guilt and own it. Atone, learn. Look for the not real guilt and let go, let go, let go. It's a practice, but it's a practice worth doing. All right, I will see you at the same time, same place next week for more transforming anxiety. And until then, please take care. Do you have someone to help you with your stress, anxiety, worry, and overwhelm? If not, I would love to be your coach. The Fierce Calm Project is my virtual coaching program where we get to go in on topics like this one, and I can help you apply these lessons to your life so that you're creating your own transformation. We do live coaching calls, guided meditations, on-demand yoga classes. We hold book club where we read books your neighborhood book club won't, and there's lots of bonus content that I've created just for you. When you're ready to take what you're learning on the podcast to a whole other level, then come on over and check out the Fierce Calm Project at kellyhanlonmccormick.com/Fierce Calm Project.